It'd been quite a while since I'd read Hands by Unseen Wombat. A long while. I remember it being one of the earliest creepypastas I'd encountered. Before I decided to make this video, I re-listened to the audio narration done by Mr. Creepypasta, which I will link in the video description. The story popped back into my head after a long first week with my new internship. I'm on summer break from college, but I have a full-time paid internship doing IT work. I'm honestly finding it very hard to wake up and go to work. This dread and exhaustion was linked in my brain to a story from my past, a story I first read when I'd just gotten my first smartphone. The Sony Ericsson Xperia Play was a wreck of a phone, but I was proud to own a smartphone at age 13. I remember my impression as a young teenager that the story was scary but amazing. The idea of having lucid visions was quite interesting. I totally missed the point of the story in a way, and I was somewhat like the narrator, who was going along life on a track and just taking everything for what it was. The things that your brain links is amazing. Even though I'd missed the point of the story the first time through, my brain never forgot it, and it somehow resurfaced when I needed it to. Some part of me understood Mike's pain. For the first time, I understood what the author meant by the hands. The story begins setting the scene of a dull town with teenagers just wanting to do something. They were just trying to pass the time. I was all too familiar with this idea, but it was a bit reassuring knowing that they too were going through this. For all intents and purposes, though, every character in the story with the exception of Mike is empty and serves only to show us what is normal. We identify with them. They just want to have fun with no regard for the future. Mike is different. He's introduced as climbing up a tower and jumping, then repeating it. This is symbolic of the cyclic nature of his life. Things are sometimes needlessly repeated, even when a risk may be associated. This is in little regard for the future. It's a reoccurring theme through the story, and a large part of teenage culture. Mike is content with his cycle of climbing and jumping, but eventually caves to peer pressure to try the pass-out game that the rest of the characters try. In the spirit of a horror story, Mike is given an incredibly traumatic vision, which ultimately brings about the title piece of the story. Mike struggles with what he's seen, and his friends do little to make this better. They simply ask him what he has seen, but they quickly realize that Mike experienced something so much larger than they could have imagined. It's here that I'll speculate about what I believe the story is trying to say. Mike goes on to describe his nights spent as being invaded by hands. When asked what he does to keep them out, he says that he pushes back. I believe this is Mike trying to say that his vision revealed to him what his life was like. He saw that his life was repeating and boring. This brought on a depression, which is expressed through a lack of interest in his friends, and a lack of interest in his hobbies like gaming, which he offers to give back to his friends. He feels defeat. The hands symbolize the stressors of life. The fact that Mike is a teenager is certainly fitting. He's overwhelmed with emotions and suffers from depression. He isn't like his friends, and they don't understand him. These are 2 points which are made clear. The first is when the narrator states that he realizes how badly he messed up by choosing a macho image over staying with Mike, and the second is the ramble about the Egyptian priests at the end. This ramble appeared to me to be the narrator attempting to rationalize Mike's actions. He failed to understand what Mike was experiencing. In the end, Mike couldn't keep putting effort in life. This is the overarching message that the author is trying to convey. The vision, if there was one, was simply Mike coming to terms with this fact. There are certain points when life feels overwhelming. Unfortunately, some people cannot handle these times. Mike gave in, and that's what the story was saying. That makes it feel so much scarier, in my opinion. Stripped of its supernatural elements, we see that Mike is just a lost teenager. He was going through a lot and eventually succumbed to this depression. The hands around him simply pushed too hard. As I begin my first work experience, I understand where these feelings come from. I wake up at 6 and leave for work at 7. I don't get home much before 6, and after dinner I scarcely have 2 hours of free time before I have to retire to bed. I was severely frustrated by this change. In college, I had nothing but free time, and I could arrange my schedule however I saw fit. I was wholly unprepared for that to come to a screeching halt. This lack of freedom is, in some sense, analogous to the hands described in the story. I'm sure everyone experiences this at some point, and that just makes the idea more chilling. Over the course of this summer, I believe I will adjust and adapt I guess it's just what we all have to go through. We have to be willing to push back against what is all around us. And that's the lesson that the story teaches us.